So as Richard said, my name's Matt Tett. My principal role is a Managing Director of ENEX Test Lab. So yes, there is a potential conflict for interest here, although ENEX does recuse themselves from any of the testing that the Trustmark will be doing in the future. So we are a conformity assessment body. This is where this work's come from, but we're the ones that have to deal with all these standards, as I'm sure you've heard all throughout the day, and then work with the vendors to ensure that their product and their security claims actually conform to those. So today I've been asked to talk about the Connected Product Security Conformance Assessment Certification Labelling that's around the globe. I'm sure you've all heard from vendors that they have to comply in so many jurisdictions now they don't know which one to start with. The standards legislation, not just the standards and legislation, but also the surveillance, the compliance, the certification, the regulation and the policing. The policing and enforcement is the critical bit. That's the one that all the directors and the owners of the companies are most concerned about, particularly around PSTI here, because it's not just the vendors which are under the spotlight, it's also the distributors and the importers of those products. So their vendors may be telling them that the products are compliant, but how do they really know? And then obviously the pros, cons and the effects of product security conformity. That's one of the big things that everyone says, it's the devil we need, but how do you actually ensure product security the minute it's out the door or the minute it's been developed? Security isn't a static point in time. And then we look at the consumers, manufacturers, distributors, retailers and government, because ultimately that is what we're here to do, is to protect the safety and privacy of the consumers of these products, whether they're government departments or agencies, or whether they're mums and dads, and making sure that the vendors are actually developing the products with baseline requirements in mind. This is the fine print, and I'm not going to go through each one of these. So as I'm sure you've heard today, there's so many different and differing standards. What is the Internet of Things? What are connected products? I mean, it's still a debate which is going on. It didn't surprise me when Simon mentioned it. Sadly, I think out of all the jurisdictions that we work with and that we've consulted for, probably the best definition is the one that Europe adopted: any device with a digital element. It's pretty straightforward, it's pretty obvious, but then every single industry, you go from automotive and defence down to basic consumer devices like light globes. How does that affect each of those industries? So won't bore you with the fine print. Government departments and agencies, not just standards bodies, are also very good at issuing guidelines, guidance as well. And then obviously there's legislation. And finally, we have the industry themselves, who are also very good at making claims about what they should and shouldn't conform to, and how their product should and shouldn't be treated from a security perspective. So there's a massive landscape out there all around the world, from standards bodies to governments to vendors to everyone in between. So it's a muddied field, and it doesn't stay still. It does take a long time to put standards up and get them through, but they don't last very long once they're out in the field, particularly when it comes to security. So legislation. So we have finally, after a number of years, the UK has got their legislation through, the PSTI bill, the Act. Australia has just literally 2 weeks ago lodged their cybersecurity bill. Thankfully, Australia still follows the UK, so we've pretty much got exactly the same legislation which is going forward that DCMS and now DCIT are responsible for. However, we're 2 years behind, so in 2 years' time we'll be standing here in the exact same place saying our bill's just come through and now we're looking at enforcing. And then obviously CRA, I think CRA came out the day after, or went through EU the day after, so it's now finally been adopted, but again there's some lead time, 2025, 2027 people are talking about. So not only do we have standards, guidelines, legislation now, which is good because legislation actually gets the people who are supposed to make compliant products sit up and actually listen and make sure that they're at least doing the minimum level required to meet those jurisdictional requirements, and there'll be more coming throughout the world. Conformance schemes, so we've all heard of Singapore, Finland, Germany, India, and that's German BSI, not the British Standards Institute, so the German Federal Office for Information Security have their own label, India and the United States, so they've all got their own schemes which they're setting up to look at conformity assessment and certification for products that are sold into their domestic markets. There are also industry-backed or led initiatives which seek to provide vendors with their own self-attestation. So there's groups or consortia of organisations which are working from the vendor's perspective to enable them to self-certify or self-attest. And then there are also a number of laboratories around the world which do informal or proprietary conformity assessments and issue reference documents based on that. So again, another way for organisations to transfer or de-risk themselves and make sure that the products that they are producing do conform in some way, shape or form to the standards or the requirements under legislation. So Cyber Trust Mark, so this is something we've been working on for nearly 15 years now, but in earnest since 2016. It's taken a very long time to get to market because of lawyers. Lawyers take a very long time to put anything through. Plus, it's a global scheme, so it's not just any domestic scheme, so it's not just focusing on any one jurisdiction. It's ensuring that it harmonises with all legislation. The majority of the standards, luckily there's no direct conflicts or criticisms of many of the standards. The EN 303645 is the one which is commonly cited, but obviously there are other standards which are up and coming. So the baseline requirements don't necessarily set any one standard as the be-all and end-all, because again, as I said, those change over time. Has some unique IP, because obviously security isn't a point in time. You can't just issue a certificate for a period of time and say that product, its security is going to be standing for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. So it has to ensure that it's a live label and it's a live certificate. So you could be certified today and that could be revoked tomorrow based on how your conformity assessment's been undertaken by the accredited test facility and how the jurisdictions work in terms of releasing vulnerabilities against your software bill of materials, and indeed the hardware of the device as well, as we've seen with some of the major multinational vendors. It's a federated framework, so again, can't have any one single point of failure or any one organisation, so it's market-led. It's a conformity assessment to those baseline requirements, which are based around standards and legislation, preferably legislation, because it's as black and white as you can possibly get. It issues a certification, but as I said, it's a live certification. It's not an enduring certification. And it also includes a voluntary cybersecurity labelling scheme if vendors wish to participate. And again, it's a live label. So to date, we've got certification trademark, so it enables us to certify the conformity of product security in the United Kingdom, European Union, the United States, Australia, and we've got several other jurisdictions, which I'm sure you can guess from those ones who they'd be that are currently pending. One of the downsides to it is we've only just been able to start operating this year. You can't operate until you own the certification trademarks. If you start operating commercially, then they can recall those products that have been certified. So we've had to wait, I think 2021 August was the first time we started the process, and it took until I think May 2024, which is when we got our last certification trademark that enabled us to actually go live. So next year, I'm sure in the UK, you'll hear a lot more noise around the certification scheme and the program itself. This is it, the pros, cons and effects. So this is the main slide. You see a lot of people making a lot of claims around how secure their product is and how secure their products are. Unfortunately, as you know, buyers need to be aware, and you can't put lipstick on a pig. So many people say, oh, it's like electrical safety. You just have to do some basic assessments and give a conformity certificate. Security doesn't sit like electricity. Neither is it like nutrition labels or energy ratings. So unfortunately, we've had to develop quite a number of different methods of looking at how to work with the ebb and flow of security researchers particularly, and ensure that we have that conformity assessment, which is where the framework comes in. So IoTSF's framework is a really good pre-qualification. So as Richard said, it's a very good lead in to schemes like this, where we have vendor claims documents. So a vendor claims document could easily be output from the IoTSF framework, along with the SBOM. So as we all know, software bill of materials is an up-and-coming requirement, and that is also part of this scheme. The scheme has to include constant surveillance, so obviously the the scheme decision authority has to ensure that they're constantly surveilling the market to ensure that any products that have certification should remain certified, or whether they should be suspended, or whether their certification should be revoked. Connected products, really, consumers are everyone. Everyone has devices. It doesn't matter who you are. Critical infrastructure, systems of national significance, defence, mums and dads, vehicle operators, businesses. Everyone is a consumer of connected products. IoT security equals safety. So connected devices, safety and privacy, that's what we're looking for. So that's something that a lot of people lose sight of, particularly in the echo chamber of cybersecurity. People forget what we're actually doing it for. It's to protect data, it's to protect humans, and it's to protect information. So it's a global issue that has no political boundaries. As we heard today in a couple of the early sessions, it's a $10 trillion, cybercrime is a $10 trillion global problem. However, everyone's benchmarking it against each other's economies. So, you know, how does that break down across each economies, or is it something that goes without borders? And honestly, we believe it goes without borders. Manufacturers don't want to have to comply in many jurisdictions. They want one ring which will tie them all together, and they can go to one assessment and one group. The supply chain is another really critical area, as we've seen, even with common criteria. So they require clear guidelines and guidance. As I said, PSTI is really good because it includes the scope. Even if a manufacturer is offshore, but someone's importing that product into the country, it's the registered company in the UK, which is the one that needs to ensure that their vendors' products are actually conforming, else they'll be the one that gets the knock on the door. I'm sure they'll then knock on their vendor's door, but at the end of the day, vendors are very good at claiming that they're compliant, particularly if it's a self-regulated program, and then they'll claim that they couldn't understand the requirements, or that it was very grey for them. As I said, the consumers really, no matter how large or small, really require a clear indication of a product's current security certification status and conformity with their local requirements. So consumers really want that education, and it's a critical thing that they come up with. And then governments aren't necessarily there to prosecute. They're not there with a big stick. It's probably better to carry a carrot than a stick, but at the end of the day, governments still need that assurance that the majority of the products that are on their market comply with their regulation, and then they can focus their enforcement efforts on those that are less than compliant. Certifications and labels, as I said, can't be binary. You can't just issue a certificate and then walk away and forget about it. Same with labels. Cyber's not static, and the programs need to move with it. So thank you. That's me. If anyone wants to contact me or touch base, they're my details, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. So thank you, Richard.
Matt, thanks very much.